Hi, my name is Rochelle, and you're watching or listening to Box F1 Pod. Welcome to the Singapore Grand Prix episode. I know it's been a minute. I've been traveling, had some really exciting F1 stories happen to me-ish. So we'll get into all of that, but I pray I don't travel for the foreseeable future, so should be here and planted and recording every episode up until the end of the season, at least. So today we're in Singapore, which was exciting-ish. There were exciting moments and there were exciting developments for the general state of the rest of the season. I will be recapping Monza and Baku a little bit, but mostly some highlights and then how it ties into the rest of the season. And really, when I say that, I'm just talking about the fuck is going on at McLaren. While we chat, I will be making a Hainanese chicken rice dish, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a classic dish from Singapore, also some neighboring countries as well, but it's traditional to Singapore. I will be doing my darnest to make it happen. As you can see behind me, I've already got the broth. Well, you can't see that, you just see pots, but there is the broths in here, and it's a cooking. I will be taking the chicken that we'll be eating out a little earlier and chopping up stuff for the sauce, etc., the rice. And while we do that, let's kick things off with the digital warm-up. Lap 1. All right, lap 1, F1 news. Pierre Gasly's contract got extended. We still don't know who's going to be driving with him, but he is here for the foreseeable future. So is, unfortunately, Flavio Briatore. Fred Vasseur did an interview where he was being asked, who of the team principals would you trust to, be your best man? And he said, Toto. Who of the team principals would you trust to cut your hair? He said, anyone. Look at me, I'm bald. And then he was asked who would be his, emergency contact. And he said, Flavio Briatore. And then Tabri was like, okay, then. But, honestly, why wouldn't it be Flavio Briatore? If you're close enough to Flavio Briatore, that man can bail you out of anything, I'm pretty sure. So I feel like that response checks out. But, Flavio Briatore does scare the living crap out of me. The Monaco Grand Prix and the Azerbaijan Grand Prix have both been extended for multi-year contracts, well into 2030s, I believe. Monaco is definitely until 2035. Baku, I think, also is somewhere around there. I think they just get extended by decades, honestly. If you remember a few races ago, Carlos and someone had Liam Lawson had a racing incident. And it was a racing incident, but if we were going to assign blame, it was 100% Liam Lawson's fault. But for some reason, Carlos got penalized and got penalty points to his license. So the stewards have been reevaluating this entire time and have come to the conclusion that they removed the penalty points off his license, but since the race is over, they can't take away the penalty he served during the race. So that infraction stays. Also, this is kind of important for this race, but the cooling vests that some drivers opted to wear in Singapore, i.e. George, will become mandatory next year, something that does not make any of the drivers particularly happy. They believe that they should have the choice as to whether they wear those cooling vests or not, especially because it doesn't seem like the technology is necessarily there. George wore it during the Singapore Grand Prix and he looked just as sweaty as the rest of them. So does it actually have, doesn't seem like he had basically heat stroke like he did last year, but everyone was suffering last year, and this year they all just seemed miserable and hot, but not needs medical attention. And so because the technology is not yet developed, and also it changes the weight of the car, so because it adds weight to the car, this year, for example, they all had to adjust weight accordingly, since someone might be wearing a cooling vest, so they all had to be equal. Next year, everyone's going to be wearing a cooling vest, so that will change the total weight of the car, the total weight of the driver, etc., which is annoying, especially for technology that seems kind of finicky. I don't remember who else opted to wear the vest. I just know George definitely did. So that's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds next year. Also in Singapore, I'll mention in a second, but they did announce a heat advisory this time around. I think I don't think it was as hot as last year, but I think out of abundance of precaution and to seem like they're doing stuff for safety. Because that's like what they're saying, that the cooling vests are required in terms of safety. And Max I think he said something along the lines of basically like sometimes FAA hides behind the claim for safety when they just like make rules to make rules. But so I think that just to like save face, like, because last year they received a lot of flack for letting the drivers race in those conditions. So they're like, it's hot, FYI. All right, lap 2, off-track F1. This one is lengthy, so buckle up. First up is Roscoe. Roscoe passed away after 4 days on life support, and it was honestly one of the saddest things I think that's ever happened during my time with F1. He was such like what do British people say? Part of the furniture when it comes to F1. Like, he was always there. Like, you always knew when you tuned in, you would see Roscoe somewhere trudging along. Like, he also was one of the most like, he has the best life. He had the best life. He was so well taken care of. He traveled in luxury. He was carried upstairs. He ate well. He's like, Lewis was talking about how he took him to the movies, and like they would like, I think he also knew that time was coming to an end, because during the summer break, everyone posted their girlfriends, and Lewis just posted a lot of pictures with Roscoe, which was just really wholesome. And it's sad. My heart goes out to Lewis, because he honestly didn't have to race this weekend. Everyone would have understood if he took time off, but it truly is so sad. Roscoe was the OG paddock pet, and now he's just gone. But I think it was also like pretty touching for Lewis to see how many lives Roscoe touched. So Roscoe, you will be missed. You created quite a legacy for yourself. All right, moving on to other animals. Sparkles the unicorn. So in case you missed this little saga, a few weeks ago, a little fan wrote into the Williams Q&A, holding up her stuffed toy unicorn, and said, Carlos, will you help me name this unicorn? I can't decide between Sparkles and Sprinkles. And also, could you please put a sticker of him on your helmet and wear it for the rest of the season? And Carlos was like, send me a sticker, bro, and I'll wear it. I don't think he actually named it in that video, but somehow the name just became Sparkles, which TBH is the correct name for this unicorn. So someone made a sticker. I doubt it was a little girl, but Williams made a sticker of this unicorn. Carlos put it on his helmet. It was like, they made a cute video. It was so nice. Everyone thought it was the end of that. It was not the end of that, because then Carlos got P2 in quali and finished podium third in the race, which is insane in a Williams. This was the first podium for Williams in years. Like, truly years. It was the first one under James Vowles. It was a whole thing. And of course, it was exclusively because of Sparkles, the unicorn. There was a video follow-up from the girl where she's like losing her mind. Every video, he's like pointing to his helmet. It's just like, it's taken on a whole life of its own. And he's like, I'm not taking this off for the rest of the season. And honestly, like, it was a little touch and go for this race in terms of whether Sparkles actually had the magical powers we all thought it did. But then Carlos started at the back of the grid and podium. Sorry, whoa, that was a little dramatic. He didn't podium. He's finished in the points by 1 point, which, TBH, given the way Williams was performing this entire weekend, I would call that pretty freaking lucky. So I think the legend of Sprinkles lives on, personally. All right, a few Baku fun moments that happened. There was a cat on track that was ended up getting a pat. Like, there's a lot of stray cats often in Baku. And this year there was a cat that was like, that just became insta famous. Everyone was posting this cat. And they ended up giving this cat a paddock pass and naming him Ferrari. And this poor cat was just being like paraded around. And now there are rumors, I believe they have not been confirmed yet, but there are rumors that Alex's family is adopting the cat, which is just so Alex. And I hope that's true because I love that story. Also, there was an absolutely hilarious moment when a kid, during the national anthem in Baku, one of the grid kids, well, all of the grid kids were singing with quite a bit of enthusiasm, like more so than usual. But there was one grid kid who was just like belting, like with his entire body, this national anthem. It was Lando's grid kid. And all of the drivers were trying so hard not to lose it. It was so funny. Some of them just weren't even attempting to hide it. They were just like full on cackling. Like Lando kept having to turn away to not be disrespectful during the anthem, but it was pretty funny. Side note, when Carlos won in Baku and literally the entire Williams garage came to celebrate him at the podium, there was this one man there. He was clearly Spanish and he was pretty. He was a pretty man. And the entirety of the internet lost their minds. They're like, who is this? Everyone could, based on the hair, he was like, it was pretty obvious. It was a relative. I think it's one of his cousins, but in the show notes, I linked his Instagram if anyone is curious to see this beautiful, beautiful man with a beautiful head of hair. There is something in the Sainz family where they just make pretty hair. But yes, the link is in the bio if you would like to go look at this pretty Sainz relative who caused a lot of distress across the internet. Literally I saw so many TikToks that were like, I'm really happy for Carlos and all, but literally, who is this? Like, who is this man? One of my favorite stories from Baku was when Charles and Carlos, so they always ride together because they're friends, I just like to say, but also because they're both sponsored by VistaJet. So they always go home together after the race. And there was some sort of weather situation that made them emergency land in Italy instead of going to Nice and then driving from Nice. So in the middle of the night, Carlos and Charles had to like rent a van, and they got the jankiest van. Like they literally rented the most janky van probably available in all of Italy. And had to drive it home to Monaco. And Charles first posted this on his story. And it's Carlos driving this janky van in the middle of the night going like, we're about 2 hours from Monaco, but I'll get us there in an hour and a half. And Charles was like, no. And Carlos was like, no, of course not. And it was just... it was really funny. Then they posted like the whole behind the scenes of them at the rental car station. Like imagine at 1 a.m. and I can almost guarantee that they knew who they were. It's not like they're in the middle of like Kentucky. In the middle of Italy, it's 1 a.m. You're working your shift at the car rental place, and in walks in Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Comically like that, the people working there must be still telling that story. I would. Anyway, and then like Charles is like giggling so hard behind the camera, and Carlos is like, Charles found this really funny. I don't think it was that funny. It's a great story to tell for the future, but in the moment we were pretty pissed. It was rough. He's like, it's the middle of the night. None of us want to be stranded in Italy. We want to be home. But he's like, we'll remember this forever. So it was fine. Anyway, they got a lot of content from this trip. I think one of their photographers was with them because they got some really good pictures for them being stranded in the middle of the night in Italy. Whoa. In other news in Italy, Charles's brother got married again. They had a wedding earlier in the year. Like I think that was the civil ceremony in Monaco. And then they had a second wedding in Italy that was like all formal in the church. Because I remember at the time thinking all the men were dressed super casual, even though everyone was dressed really casually. And then the wife said that there was another wedding coming, which honestly made sense. And this was obviously very formal. The only sad thing is the pictures are beautiful, by the way. Whoever picked the venue, I'm assuming it was her, the lighting in there is insane. The lighting at this wedding was stunning. Like when she walked in, she was like just basked in this like ethereal glow that it literally looked like God himself was like blessing this marriage. But it was beautiful from beginning to end. But it seems that the Italian media published where they were getting married. So there was a bunch of Charles fans that showed up to the wedding. So when they came outside to like throw like flowers or rice, or whatever people throw at the couple as they're coming out, they're all just like shouting Charles, Charles, Charles. And he's like trying to quiet them down, being like, not the time, guys. And they're all there and it's so annoying. I felt really bad for him. All right, birthdays. So I didn't miss this one. This was back right after the Dutch Grand Prix and before the Italian Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz turned 31. It makes me so happy we're the same age. I don't know why. It just feels like, actually, no, it should make me really sad because what have I accomplished compared to Carlos Sainz? Esteban Ocon turned 29. He had a cake and they got a picture of him on a plane flying to the race with Lando, Jack Doohan, Ollie Beerman, and Nico. And again, I would love to chat with the person who books these flights because I just would love to know what they're thinking. Is it purely logistical? Do they ever think it's funny? Like, do drivers make requests? Like, how is this planned? Isaac turned 21 last week, I believe, which is right in time for Austin. He's grown up so fast. Max turned 28, and in the words of Yuki Tsunoda, happy birthday, Big Daddy. I don't claim that joke. Red Bull Racing called him Big Daddy in their caption, and it made me laugh. So I thought I'd say it too. Max has entered his new racing era. So he's competing in GT3, which you're about to find out that I know very little about racing outside of the world of Formula One. They look like NASCAR cars. They just look like regular cars. And he did it at the Nürburgring. A few weeks ago, he was qualifying for it or trying to get a license to compete in it. So he participated in a race, I believe, but he had like a weight add-on to make it heavier. So there's like a video of him like just slowing down compared to everyone else because he had the extra weight. And then he also had an instructor that had to teach him how to drive. And I just can imagine that instructor being like, I have to why am I, what? But anyway, he went through all of that because those are the rules and regulations and Max follows the rules. He finished 6th in that particular race, which with the weight limit is kind of crazy. And then he competed in this race. It's an endurance race. So there's multiple people on the team. He finished 1st with this team. The, of course, ongoing joke is it was a Ferrari that he was driving. So everyone keeps joking that who knew that Max Verstappen would be the first person to win in a Ferrari in 2025. Pretty good joke. There was also, people are like speculating about whether there's like a Holy Trinity type situation with racing. So it's like the Indy 500, Formula One, and Le Mans. And he's definitely expressed interest in Le Mans. He wants to compete with his dad or Fernando Alonso, which I find hilarious. And actually a really great combination. I hope they do that. But he has explicitly said he doesn't want to compete in Indy 500. I don't think we can discount it, but from what I understand, Indy 500 is actually really dangerous, and even people who compete in Indy often opt out of the Indy 500. But anyway, he said he's not interested in that. Apparently it's super dangerous, and now he's like in a different era of his life. We can't discount Max just like changing his mind. He clearly loves racing. He's raced 6 weeks in a row. He was like, after he's taking this weekend off, he's like, this is enough. But like, what a guy. Like, I just think it's hilarious and incredible. Like, he truly loves racing. Like, he loves racing. Other people have hobbies. They play golf, they whatever. Max's hobby is e-racing or iRacing, whatever it's called, racing virtually. And now apparently just racing in other things. Some of the drivers have commented on it, mostly because I think they're asked. Lando said something about, this is not verbatim, but he said something about like, well, Max isn't fighting for the world championship, so he can afford to go off and race in another series on his weekends off. George was slightly more eloquent and said something like, everyone is jealous of Max, but like he's earned the right as a 4-time world champion to explore other interests since he's had 4 world champions, which I think is fair enough and a nicer way to say what Lando said. All right, now some random things. George Russell, a couple of weeks ago, posted a picture of him and Carmen, his girlfriend, dressed to go to a party, and like they're both wearing like half black tie and half racing gear, and apparently they were invited to a racing themed party, which I think whoever opted into hosting a racing themed party and invited George Russell is weird and hilarious at the same time. This is one of the weirdest things I've ever heard. A wearable technology company who also partners with the Chinese military has been accused of harvesting elite athletes' brain data and selling it to the military, which now also apparently includes Charles Leclerc. First of all, what is brain data? Like, what does that mean? But regardless of whether this is true or not and what it entails, the comments on it have been hilarious, and it's mostly just like the Chinese army is about to get real sad. Chinese army is about to question their existence. The Chinese army is about to like think everything's going to go great, and then everything's going to come crashing down around them, which is kind of funny. This was one of the most hilarious disses that I don't think actually was intended as a diss, but it definitely came off as a diss, was the drivers were asked who has the best hair on the grid, and naturally most people said Carlos. But Max said, I'll have to hold off judgment because I believe Pierre just got an upgrade and I'd like to see how it turned out. Which I don't remember if I've talked about this before because I thought it was ridiculous, but I guess it's true. There's been rumors since the beginning of this year that Pierre got a hair transplant, and that's why he came in like with a shaved head, because it was just like growing back. But no one talks about it except for Max. I don't think he was actually intending to shade Pierre, but like that's how it came out. Lando was in Vogue UK and did he looked great in that photo shoot. He wore a crop top in one. He's ripped. It looked like it was at the McLaren HQ. It was a stunning set of shots. He talked about his relationship for the first time, which is exciting because I think he's been scared to do that before. But yeah, speaking of the HQ McLaren, I was in London for the last month, and I met this woman who is Brazilian. And so obviously I asked her, like, do you like Formula One? And she like literally teared up. Talking about Senna, she was like, I remember the day it happened. Nothing's been the same since. Like, it was like actually really sad. I started tearing up. But she told me her husband paints F1 liveries, but like road car liveries, and he works at McLaren, the headquarters, and in Woking, I think. Is it Woking? So they're wherever they are in like rural outskirts of London. And he's like, when they're all having lunch, if the drivers are in, they'll come sit with them. And then she's like, paused. She's like, well, one of the drivers has lunch with them. And I was like, is it Oscar? And she was like, yes. Not for a moment did I think that Lando chills out with the random employees at McLaren, but it does seem like something Oscar would do without making it like he would just like sit down with them. Because he needs somewhere to eat his lunch. And I doubt Lando does. And I was right. I wouldn't have considered that any of them do, like, overlap with I actually didn't really consider the fact that road car McLaren employees work at that factory. For some reason in my head, it was just F1 specific, but that obviously doesn't make any sense. But I just thought that was really cool. And it was a cute moment to chat about F1. All right, moving on, lap 3, trackside in Singapore. Rebecca Donaldson, Carlos's girlfriend, had a Sparkles unicorn knitted bag charm attached to her purse, which I loved. There was also a great shot of her, Alex, Charles's girlfriend, and Lily, Alex Albon's girlfriend, walking through I think someone else was with them, walking through the paddock, and Carmen? Maybe Lily wasn't there. I think it was 3 of them. I think it might have been Carmen, Rebecca, and Alex. And they all looked insane. They all had great outfits. Like, personally, my favorite wags are Carmen and Lily. And honestly, Carmen is what makes me continue to hold out faith for George. not being a robot, because I adore her and he adores her and she loves him. So he must be lovely, is what I've concluded. But I love the Wags. Chloe Stroll, Lance's sister, and her husband, Scotty James, who is an Olympic snowboarder from Australia. That sentence never makes sense to me. An Olympic snowboarder from Australia. How did he get into snowboarding? No fucking clue. Anyway, he's a gold medalist, so he and their new baby and Lance's mom were all at the race. Chloe and Lance's mom were holding hands like the whole time. They looked a little distressed. Again, Chloe Stroll is what makes me believe Lawrence Stroll is a good man. The way he treats his children, every time I say I'm slightly a Lawrence Stroll apologist, the looks I get, and I just like don't. Lawrence hasn't actively done anything evil that I can remember. He's just like a direct businessman who makes aggressive business decisions and seems to have bought an F1 team for his son, which I think he did. But I think Lance is racing for his dad. Again, I've been through this theory before. I think there's like some aggressive miscommunication in that family about what people actually want, and people are just, they're Canadian. They're all trying to make each other happy, and I feel like in the end, no one's happy. And I feel like Lawrence's team would be much more successful if he let his son go. But I don't think he knows his son wants to go. And I made all of that up. Not made it up. I'm assuming it. And I feel like I'm right, but I have no evidence to back it up. So it's all alleged. Lewis Capaldi, who I love, is there. He's performing with Elton John, and he was on the grid before the race, and Brundle found him. But first, he found his brother, who honestly don't fully blame Brundle. It was more like a alternate version of Lewis that would have made me do a double take. I would have been like, you look like Lewis. I wouldn't have full on been like, hey, Lewis, which is what Brundle did to Lewis's brother. And Lewis's brother's like, I'm not Lewis, I'm his brother. And then Lewis popped out off camera and he's like, I'm Lewis. And they chatted. And then Brundle was like, thanks so much for talking to me. Have a good race. And Lewis extends his hand to shake it, but Brundle didn't see, and he'd already turned around. And so Lewis like extends his hand, grabs his own hand, shakes it. He's like, I'll get that. Lewis is continuously funny. Like, he's not even trying. He was on Graham Norton on Friday with Taylor Swift and Cillian Murphy with Brendan Gleeson's son, whose name I can't remember, who was also in Harry Potter, and he's in that new like Office reboot. And anyway, the ginger guy, he was there. And then it was, can't remember her name, but she was in the morning show, and now she's in a new movie about Tron. And then this other woman who was there the last time Lewis Capaldi was on Graham Norton, when she was really pregnant. And when Lewis swore, he like apologized to her bump, and he brought it up. Graham Norton's like, have you met these people before? He's like, obviously I know Taylor. He didn't say obviously, I'm saying obviously. He's like, I know Taylor. She like raised her hand. She's like, I know him. haven't met Cillian before. And I've met the woman who was on the cast. I don't remember anyone's name besides Cillian Murphy, something Gleeson, and Taylor Swift. I apologize to other women because I love the woman from Morning Show. But I wish I remembered her name. I could look it up. Should I look it up? Okay. Greta Lee. Her name is Greta Lee. Should I redo it so it makes it sound like I knew the whole time? On the couch was Taylor Swift, Cillian Murphy, Brendan. I might as well look everyone up now. All right, let's start again. Taylor Swift, Cillian Murphy, Greta Lee, Jodie Turner, Donald Gleeson, Lewis Capaldi. We're on Graham. This isn't even related to F1. I don't know why I went through all that effort. We're on the couch at Graham Norton. Lewis was there. He was like, yes, I've met Jodie before on your couch, actually. And Graham Norton's like, oh, yeah, I forgot. I think he actually did. And then Lewis was like, I apologize to your baby bump after swearing. And I've often wondered since then if your baby's first word was the C word. Greta looked appalled. Taylor's obviously dated British men before. Joe Alwyn. She also dated Scott before. Calvin Harris. And she's probably a lot more familiar with the term than Greta Lee was, who looked literally appalled. That was the first time I've seen Cillian Murphy genuinely laugh. Like, he looked like he was shocked and amused, and like he looked like he genuinely enjoyed that moment, and everything Lewis Capaldi said, he just like seemed to give like a genuine laugh for, which I love because he does not like this stuff, and clearly Lewis relaxed him. But anyway, Lewis was in Singapore. Also, this is full on a theory, I guess, but since Baku 2 weeks ago, the enemy relationship between Max and George, I think, has tentatively moved to frenemies, and I believe we might be in a frenemies to lover timeline situation. There's been several comments from which I have deduced this. Whoa, last time they were both on the podium together, and they were obviously in the post-race press conference, and George said he was Team Verstappen as a joke, but it was pretty funny. And then this time in the pre-race press conferences, everyone was being asked what the chances of Lewis, oh my God, why do I keep saying Lewis? I'm really caught on Lewis Capaldi. The chances of Max Verstappen winning the world championship. I think Lando said above 0. Charles gave him 20. Isaac gave him 10 or 15. It was like 10, 15, 20. I know Charles gave him 20, which was the highest, other than George Russell, who was in the press conference with Lando, which obviously is 90% of the reason he said this. And he looked dead in Lando's eyes and said 100%. But like, yes, it was to mock Lando, but at the same time, I feel like there's a lot of truth in what he was feeling in the moment. I think we're on a trajectory. Then there's like moments of them like after quali yesterday, today, like them post race, like them giggling and talking. Anyway, other celebrities, K-pop group, I'm so sorry, I don't follow. I don't know how to pronounce it. I think it's like N-hyphen, but it's supposed to reference a hyphen. They're a K-pop group. They met Max and Yuki and were guests of Red Bull. One of their members is obsessed with Max Verstappen. During one of their concerts, he played the do Max Verstappen and was like jumping around, and the rest of the band members were like, what is going on? He loves Max. And so they got to meet Max, and Max walked in and he was really polite, like shook everyone's hand. And this guy, I think his name's Jay, was like, congratulations on your win. In GT3, it was amazing. And Max was like, oh, you were following? He's like, yeah. Also, I'm really happy for you about Lily. It was so wholesome. It was so cute. And like, he genuinely seems to love and adore Max. And because they're famous, like, I feel like if a normal person, like, Max will still be polite, but when like you're on par with each other-ish, it's just much more wholesome coming from like a celebrity. And then Max was asking about their tour schedule, and they're performing in Singapore for the same length as the race. So they have time during the day. Well, the race was at night. I don't know if they got to watch the actual race, but they had time before, like, to meet him and stuff. And they did a bunch of videos. They also met Yuki. And I love that he's like just brought his band members along for the journey. And it was great. All right. That concludes the digital warm-up. On to analysis. Moving on to analysis, we're going to start with a brief Monza recap. The biggest takeaway, I think, was that Max had a very, very well-deserved win. He had a very well-deserved win, and it was great to see him back on top after like so many months away. Like basically this entire season, he's only won twice, I think. So it was great to see him back on top. And I also think, like, he did say after the race, obviously, he prefers winning to losing. But, like, it's nice to see him work for it. And it's nice, like, I feel like he appreciated it more. There was less complacency. Like, you know, like, last year when he would win, he'd be like, oh, yeah, simply lovely. This year when he's winning, it's there's excitement, there's like cheers, like he dive bombs his team, like everyone's so excited for this to happen because it's like rarer. It was great to finally see him be embraced by the Tifosi, where during the national anthem, and perhaps this was just to drown out the Dutch national anthem, they started chanting do 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 Max Verstappen. I'm personally not sick of it yet. Max is probably getting to the point where he's like, enough. But it's so nice to be cheered on by people who were booing you last year that probably he doesn't care what they're singing as long as it's for him. As long as it's not a boo, he's like on board. Also, I think the weirdest thing from Monza that we can take away is the dynamic between the McLarens. Basically, Lando was faster this race and probably deserved P2, all things considered. He gets on the radio and suggests to box Oscar first instead of him. The team agrees. Oscar has a good first pit stop, and Lando pits and has a terrible pit stop, like really bad, during which time Oscar had time to get into second. When Lando rejoined the track, Oscar gets told to swap places with him. And then once they swap, they're free to race, which Oscar did. And this launched like a series of arguments about like what the hell McLaren is playing at. Max's reaction during the race, he was like, wait, so who's behind me now? And they told him, he's like, just because he had a slow pit stop. And he like starts laughing, and GP's like, Max, now is not the time. But Max was like giggling. And then during the press conference, that's like all they were asked. Basically, it was Max, Lando, and Oscar. And when like the 800th question came about that swap, Max literally just went, ugh, and like threw his head back on the couch, and Oscar and Lando are just like cackling. Oscar seems like currently incredibly amused by Max, just like all the time. The best part, I think personally, was during the park firm interviews right after the race, when Oscar was asked about it, he went, like, it's fine, like it happens. And then he pauses, and you could see his brain coming to this statement, giggling to himself and going, I would just say it was an incident. Referencing the iconic meme from Charles and Max's childhood when they had an incident during a go-kart race, and Max was like really angry about it, and he's like, it's not fair, no? And like describing what happened, and then Charles was interviewed, and he's like, just an incident on the track. I actually have a tote bag that says just an incident on it that I got for my birthday. But that was like the major takeaway from Monza that has continued to like show its face in the rest of this. All right, so I thought I was recording for like half of that, and turns out I wasn't. So in the meantime, I talked about Baku and I started about Singapore. I've done the rice, burned myself. The rice I've now poured in the chicken stock, and it is boiling behind me. And now I'll re-talk about Baku. So in Baku, Max won. There were, but in quali, there were record 6 red flags during quali, which was crazy. Carlos got second, P2, and then finished third, which was amazing. The celebrations were so fun. It was so wholesome. He said it was his best podium yet, which I think is a little crazy considering he's won after 2 weeks post appendix surgery. He was the only driver to win in Singapore, when the only other driver to win that season was a Red Bull driver. Like, he's had some epic wins, but maybe he meant podiums, like specifically. And also it's like, he's had a terrible season. Like literally when he started this year, he was like, I don't want anyone to expect a podium from us. We're still like in the works. So the fact that he was able to get a podium was amazing. Alex, I loved seeing him first in park for him to congratulate him, then with the rest of the team during the podium. When he was up there, he was with them celebrating. It was just great. And then Toto sent a little gift package to James Vowles with like champagne, some little bottle of like yellowish liquid that I think is some sort of Austrian alcohol is my guess, but I can't tell from the cover. of it. And then also those like Austrian wafers with the pink wrapping with like, it's like hazelnut wafer type things. And it's like my favorite thing ever. That was very cute. And then on the note, he wrote like, "You lucky bastard," which was very Toto and very wholesome. Oscar had one of the worst weekends in his entire life. I'm presuming he just had like a catastrophic, what's the word? Like a hat trick of mistakes. First, he crashed out in quali. Then he jumped the start during the race, realized he jumped the start, so he stopped, which made him like start like 5 seconds later than everyone else. Then he crashed into the wall before I don't even know if he got past the first turn. I can't remember. The first lap was not even finished, and he was out of the race. But the funniest thing about this to me was that he had to walk through the streets of Baku to make it back to the paddock. And like, there's like this series of photos of him like literally walking through the streets and people asking for pictures of him. And then he somehow ended up, he didn't go to the paddock. He sat on the side of the track with his feet up on the barrier with a phone, which I think a marshal gave him, watching the race on the phone and in real life. And someone gave him chocolate and a banana. His feet are up and he's just like, whatever. And the funniest thing is like, he seemed to have the exact same reaction to like when he wins a race. I don't know what happened to him. It's very out of character for him to make so many mistakes and such bad mistakes, all in a row, all in the same weekend. Like, it's like he like saved up all of his mistakes for one weekend. And this, to be fair, this weekend he didn't make any mistakes. He just like, Lando drove better than him. But it was just very uncharacteristic, and everyone was a little confused because we don't often see Oscar make any mistakes or show any sort of weakness. That's usually reserved for Lando. What was odd, though, is that Lando didn't seem to maximize on the opportunity with his number one rival and the championship leader out of the race. Like, you would have expected him to fly forward. No, I think he qualified like 7th. Like, honestly, he qualified so low, I thought he'd also crashed out, but he didn't. And then during the race, he barely overtook at all. And in front of him were like ridiculously slow cars. So like, I don't know what he was playing at. Like, how did Carlos finish in the podium and Lando didn't even, I don't think, it was really odd. And then he said after that he did the best he could, which I'm sure he did. But it's just like, you had such a great opportunity and it was wasted. Whether it was your fault or coincidental, like the opportunity was wasted. Max has beef with Lando. So during qualifying, it seems that Lando was driving slightly slower during Max's like fast lap, and like it wasn't slow enough where it would be considered impeding from like racing standards, and he was far enough ahead from Max where like there was no legal justification for it, but from what I can tell, he was informed at Max's position. So there is a chance he was driving just slightly slow enough so that Max couldn't go at his full speed. And Max seems to believe that this like stopped him from getting pole position. Don't know if that's true or not, but that's what Max believes. And during the post-quali interview in Park Ferme, he said, "It's been noted and it will be remembered." And then the interviewer was like, "Who are you talking about?" Because it seemed like he locked up and he was asked why he made that mistake. And he was like, well, when someone's driving that slowly, what are you meant to do? But it's been noted and it will be remembered. And then the guy was like, who are you talking about? And he's like, well, it wasn't Oscar. And meanwhile, Oscar is laughing so hard. He like literally has to turn away from the camera so no one can see how hard he's laughing. This has been like a recurring theme. Like, he truly has been cracking up at Max's like degaff approach to the media, because I think it's what he wants to be inside, because he also degaffs, but like he's not quite as expressive as Max. It's pretty funny. Ferrari got a 10,000 euro fine for an unsafe release of Charles in the pit lane, where he was released and literally slammed into Lando and drove off. So he got a 10,000 euro fine. I saw someone comparing it to Carlos's 20,000 euro fine for having a stomach condition and missing the first 10 seconds of the national anthem. But, anyway, Williams was disqualified because it turns out that their rear wing was slightly bigger than it was meant to be. They said they checked and it was fine, but it didn't pass the FIA inspection. So both cars were disqualified from quali, and they raced at the steward's discretion. And I believe they started from the pit lane. So the starting grid is as follows: George, Max, Oscar, Kimi, Lando, Lewis, Charles, Isaac, Ollie, Fernando, Nico, Liam, Yuki, Gabriel, Lance, Franco, Esteban, Carlos, Pierre, and Alex. So the biggest thing was the start, basically. Max didn't get quite as good of a launch as expected. George pulls away really great. Max had started on the soft tires, and everyone expected that to be like the end of, because they're faster. But the soft tires just like didn't work with the Red Bull for some reason. So Max didn't get the start that they were all expecting. George pulls away, drives a fantastic race, and we all know the heat. It's like really hard for everyone. Honestly, this is the race where I like truly like marvel at them, because I can't function in the heat. I can barely string a sentence together. So I don't know how they're driving at these speeds and these temperatures, succeeding, then discussing it after. Like, I actually don't know. But George drove a fantastic race. That start, first of all, quali set him up, and then that start really just like, and then he just had to like get through it, and it was really impressive. But Lando at the start overtakes Oscar from P5 and ends up in P3. When he did that, it was a little aggressive. He ended up clipping both Max and Oscar. I think he was the only one who got damage. But Oscar went on the radio and said, okay, that wasn't very team-like, but sure. And then later on, when that doesn't get a response, he goes, so are we just like cool with Lando barging me out of the way? Or I think his reaction is fair, because every other incident up until this point, McLaren has acted in a certain way. When Oscar had a slightly aggressive move at a start, I forgot what race it was, he was told like, we don't race like that. And he was like, got it. Lando wasn't given a reprimand. At the bare minimum, Lando should have been given a reprimand, and Oscar should have been told that wasn't okay. Clearly, McLaren has decided to let them race for reals now. And one of them was going to suffer when that call was made. In this case, it was Oscar. I don't think, from a racing standpoint, I don't think Lando's move, it was aggressive. It was a borderline in the sense that like, and Lando's never aggressive. And we spent all season, every year since Lando started being like, be more aggressive. And then he's never aggressive. And now he's aggressive. I'm like, why are you so aggressive? So like, I really can't talk. He's done exactly what we told him to do. It'd be nice if he was aggressive without clipping two drivers at once, but it's a racing incident. From like a racing standpoint, it's a racing incident. From a papaya rule standpoint, this is completely unfair to Oscar, who has suffered at the hands of the papaya rules seemingly more than Lando, whether intentionally or unintentionally. So I understand Oscar's frustration. It is completely valid. And then what's also odd is that Lando gets asked if he's okay with Oscar pitting first, to which Lando says, yeah, actually no. Why was he asked? I know he's ahead, but like, why, like still, like it's weird. He was asked also in Monza when he let him go and it didn't work out in his favor. In this case, it did work out in his favor. He had a great pit stop, and then Oscar had a bad pit stop. He still came out ahead of the rival, not on his own team, but like he had like a 5-second pit stop, which is deeply unfair. And it's like one of those things, you know, where it just feels like everything is against you. And I just felt like Oscar's spirit just kept being like throttled. And so I totally understand. I don't think enough people are giving credit to that his feelings are valid. Whether just because there was no repercussions meant for Lando, McLaren should not have told Lando to switch places. Nothing should have happened. In the same way that in many other instances before this, they shouldn't have done that. They've decided this now. They clearly didn't communicate it to the drivers, because Oscar was like, what the fuck? Like, it's not like they went into this race and clearly told the drivers, like, that's all off. Papaya rules are no more. At the very least, I said the only papaya rule is to, like, not crash into each other. And Lando crashed into Oscar. So the very least they could have said, like, you're right, Oscar. Like, he shouldn't have crashed into you. Lando, be more careful next time. Exactly what it is to Oscar. And I feel like even that would have appeased Oscar, even though they couldn't, like, switch them back because there was just, like, no merit to it. I just felt really bad for him. Basically, I just like, it feels like the whole world's against you, and even someone with as cool of a head as Oscar. I just really hope that this indicates to Oscar, like, you can stop now. Like, you can stop obeying McLaren rules. You can stop, like, being the nice guy. And I feel like I feel like Mark Webber has been telling him this whole time, like, stop. And I think this was like a turning point for Oscar, because at the end of the race, because they won the constructor championship at this race, which honestly was a shock to me because I thought they'd won it ages ago. But I guess officially it became a reality this race. Like, there was physically no way anyone else can overtake them, even though it felt like that before, but whatever. And Zach Brown gets on the radio to congratulate Oscar on the team win, and Oscar removes his steering wheel, which disconnects the radio, which could have been a coincidence. He might have not have heard Zach come on, but I feel like he was really annoyed. And then to top it all off, Andrea Stella and Zach Brown gave an interview in Park Firm, and then after the podium celebration, the whole McLaren team went up to celebrate, sans Oscar. Oscar was in the media pen. We don't know what exactly happened. I'm sure they'll tell us what happened, and it's likely going to be a spin, but it seemed there's a couple of options. One, Lando was already on the podium, so he was there, and like the whole team went to celebrate, so Lando was with them, and Oscar was ushered to the media pen. The other option is that Oscar wanted nothing to do with the celebration. And just opted out of participating, which is entirely plausible and also entirely fair of him to feel that way. I think once he watches it back, he'll realize that it was a racing incident. But again, at the same time, I think he knows it was a racing incident. And I think it's more the principle that, like, in the past, they've been told not to. They've been like, and he's suffered from the Papaya rules. And in this case, Lando benefited in a way that doesn't match the precedent that McLaren has set. So this is entirely McLaren's fault. And I think Oscar is valid in his feelings, not because there's like an FIA rule that justifies like his feelings. It's more the McLaren rules that justify his feelings. That was the big thing out of this race. Oh, sorry. Just to finish up the Oscar thing. He gets told eventually because the stewards noted the situation and said no further investigation. So the team was like, we can talk about this later, but we're just like not going to do anything about this now. Which understandably pissed off Oscar, because they were like, well, Lando was just trying to get out of the way of the other car. And Oscar was like, well, if he's avoiding another car by crashing into his teammate, he's not doing a very good job of avoiding that car, which is a great argument. He's correct. But there was just nothing, genuinely nothing that McLaren could do. So anyway, back to the radio thing. Alonso's engineer tells Alonso something, and Alonso responds, if you speak to me every lap, I'm going to disconnect my radio, which is hilarious. And then later on, he's like in a battle with Isaac, who, by the way, has an engine problem, like a bad one. And when he gets told he has an engine problem again, he goes, what is wrong with this engine again? And he like battles Fernando a little bit. Fernando overtakes him. Fernando's clearly annoyed because he knows that he's suffering from an engine issue, or like there's like some issue in his car. And Alonso goes, once he finally overtakes after battling Isaac for, I guess he feels like no reason, he goes, a trophy for the hero of the race, very sarcastically. But Mazel tov to Isaac for winning a trophy. Also, Lance on the radio, he says he gets told that the car in front of him, that Bortoletto in front of him is on 40 lap old tires, and Lance literally shouts on the radio, goes, yeah, well, my mediums feel like they're 100 laps old. Then for Isaac gets told something on the radio, that he's asked if he was out of the way of Max and Lando, and he responds, yeah. And then George is shouting on the radio, being like, blue flags, because people weren't letting him overtake. It kind of seems like everyone was having like the way they're shouting is not like an angry shout. It sounds like they feel like they can't be heard. Like, I don't know if there was like some weird connectivity issue via radio waves, but like everyone was shouting in a way that like, you can't hear me, hello. which was made for very funny radio. The most calm radio was, of course, from Oscar, who at one point gets asked if he wants to take a safety and switch to softs, and Oscar says, I don't know what to do right now. You can decide. And he just sounds so defeated, and I genuinely feel bad for him. He like truly sounds like someone who's like over it. And I really hope that this entire situation has just invigorated him and he'll come back next race like aggressive, like just really aggressive. And papaya rules to hell. We don't have to suffer because they've won the constructors now. So like whatever. Apparently we were still concerned they wouldn't win. Anyway, in the cool down room after the race, George looked like he was dying. He like literally crashed down on the ground and was just downing water. Like he looked rough. Lando also looked rough. Max always doesn't seem as impacted by heat, but everyone was just drinking water, just like glugging glass bottles of water. In the cool down room, Max was there first for like 3 minutes by himself, just like drinking. And then they had a little bit of analysis. George was, I think, baiting Lando a little, being like, oh, what happened to Oscar? Did he have damage? Why did you have damage? I don't know if he knew, but it was pretty funny. So I don't know what the reason was that Oscar wasn't in the team celebration on the podium. It was either Lando was there because he had just been on the podium, is what I'm assuming. Oscar was either not told to go to the podium, or he was already in the media pen and it didn't make sense, or he didn't want to, which is entirely fair if that was the case. I still think that him being aggrieved makes sense. But anyway, we don't know what happened. I'm sure they'll give us some sort of PR response as to why he wasn't there. And it definitely won't be because he didn't want to be, and it definitely won't be because they didn't tell him to. Whatever they tell us will probably be a lie, but we'll see. The driver of the day was Fernando, which I don't think anyone understands why it was Fernando, but it was. I personally think that there were multiple better options. George, for example, for leading the race so flawlessly. Carlos from going from last to first to points. Also impressive. Isaac for battling an engine problem. I think also impressive. I think there were just like a lot of instances of really great racing today. I have no idea why. It was Fernando. Maybe for his radio messages. The dick in the box, I think, as per usual, is McLaren. I think that they created this problem themselves, and now they're reaping the consequences of creating these weird papaya rules. So the final results are George Russell, Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, Kimi Antonelli, Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Oli Bierman, Carlos Sainz, who ended up in the points, 10 and 10, Isaac Hadjar, who just barely missed out on the points, Yuki Tsunoda, Lance Stroll, Alex Albon, Liam Lawson, Franco Colapinto, Gabriel Bortoleto, Esteban Ocon, Gasly, and Hulkenberg. Looking ahead, the McLaren situation, I think Brundle said the gloves are off. And I think they are in terms of Oscar being like, fine, I won't do this anymore. I think Max being a consistent threat is going to freak McLaren out. I think it's already freaking them out. And I think the fact that other teams like George can catch up in this manner. George has been on the podium twice in a row now. That's pretty impressive. I think it'll make McLaren question things, but I think they've lost the faith of Oscar now. I really hope they have, because I just want Oscar to go balls to the wall for the rest of the season. So the driver's standings are Oscar with 336 points, Lando with 314. They're less than a race away from each other. Max with 273, George with 237, Charles with 173, Lewis with 125, Kimi with 88, Alexander Albon with 70, Isaac with 39, Nico with 37, Fernando with 36, Carlos with 32, Lance with 32, Liam with 30, Esteban with 28, Pierre with 20, Yuki with 20, Gabriel Bortoleto with 18, Oliver Bierman with 18, Franco with 0, and Jack Doohan with 0. That second Alpine seat is struggling. Anyway, that's it for the Singapore Grand Prix. Really excited for what's to come. Don't know what's to come. On one hand, I really want Oscar to win. On the other hand, I think it'd be hilarious if Max just came out of nowhere and won the constructors and the drivers' championship. I really doubt that's going to happen. And I really hope that Oscar pulls his shit together, gets into his like villain era, and just starts winning the remaining 6 races, because I need him to do this. I think he's been treated slightly unfairly. I think circumstantially one of them was going to suffer the brunt of putting the McLaren rules aside. I think, again, the problem is them not telling them that this is the race where the McLaren rules are no longer relevant, because Oscar was confused. Anyway, the real villain so far is consistently McLaren. This is my Hainanese chicken. Hainanese chicken. Hopefully it's delicious. Sorry, it's not as pretty. I tried. Hainanese chicken. And that's it for the Singapore Grand Prix. I will see you in 2 weeks' time for Austin, when the food will suck much more. Anyways, until next time, box.